In the next 20 minutes, I'll try to address the topic of gender and climate change, a topic which coincidentally and inevitably made it to the media spotlight during the Glasgow summit, but also a topic which probably remains somehow, somewhere controversial. I'll try to make my point that the climate change is indeed gendered. You've heard about a lack of access to energy. I'll try to elaborate on that point. I also try to summarize the development at the international level and its reflection at the EU level and national level on example of the Czech Republic. And towards the end of the presentation, I'll try to make some points or ideas as possible input for the discussion. Now, following the Glasgow summit, I believe that the topic could be nicely illustrated by the words of Alok Sharma, which was the president of the summit and is the current minister in UK. And he nicely describes those two dimensions of gender issues. First, some negative impacts that are more severe based on or as an outcome of the climate change, and also the problems that arise, obstacles that arise with women and girls trying to lead efforts to tackle climate change and participating in decision making and policy making in communities around the world. Now, during the conference or during the COP26, several countries introduced amendments to their national policies as regards certain programs on emancipation of women. And furthermore, United States introduced or announced commitment to invest into support women farmers in East Africa. That means to provide technologies, information, and also education outside its territory to women located elsewhere. Furthermore, we could see a meeting of a gender equality panel that adopted the Glasgow Women's Leadership Statement on gender equality and climate change that is still open to signature until March 22, and also some specific events that served as a basis for discussion of the outcomes or impacts of the climate change on women and girls. As regards the outcomes of the summit, we also have the Glasgow Climate Pact that urges parties to respect obligations on human rights as well as gender equality and empowerment of women, and also encourages parties to increase the participation of women in policy making and decision making. This development does not come out of anything, because already we have the Sustainable Development Goals adopted in 2015, including Principle 5 on gender equality. And we also have the 2019 Gender Action Plan prepared and adopted at the level of UN. Now, this is a solid development, I would say, and in quite a stark contrast to what we discussed some 10 years ago, 12 years ago, during time in which we focused probably more on climate change as a phenomenon without trying to differentiate the outcomes and the impacts of the climate change on different kinds of population. This is, I believe, rather important, and those changes are supported by the findings of the scientists that were published in meantime, and that confirm that basically climate change is amplifying the disadvantages that already exist and that way affecting more women in terms of, as you can see, access to resources, land ownership, education, caring responsibilities, and so on. Furthermore, the women are usually or very often part of the poorest group of population and are affected not just by the state itself, but also by the global economy. Now, this problem is or sounds like a problem of South, but it is not completely. So I'll just adjust it with simple statistics that say that 80% of people displaced by climate change are women and children. And as regards access to drinking water and providing water for households, you can see that the task falls disproportionately to women and girls, especially in rural areas. If you look at precise numbers, at least what can be found is that it does not really matter whether the water is safe or not. Basically, it takes more than 30 minutes to walk for water. And in some areas, such as Asia or Africa, it takes 6 kilometers in average to reach and collect water and bring it back home. Translated to numbers, in some countries where the study actually tried to see how much time do the women and girls spend walking for water, it is 6 million hours collecting water each day. 6 million hours that could be used for different purposes, basically education or anything else. According to studies, this is not completely a southern problem, and the gender impacts are not limited to Global South. And there are some connections even to wealthy industrial countries such as EU member states. Now, does this have any legal implications? Perhaps it does, because it may render women either as a sole group or elderly women or girls as a group which is in particular vulnerable to climate change, and basically a group that requires and also can demand a specific treatment. Now, if you look at the case that was already discussed today, Agostinho versus Portugal and others, you've heard that the case is based on possible violation of articles or the rights granted by Articles 2 and 8 of the Convention. However, it seems to me that the European Court of Human Rights is treating the case quite in a delicate way, because when it communicated the case, it also asked the parties to comment on Article 3 of the Convention, which is the prohibition of torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, often found against those vulnerable groups, not only individuals, but groups in certain conditions given a specific context, and often based on sex, age and state of health. Could be girls, could be women, could be children. Agostinho, as far as I know, it's 4 girls and 2 boys. So basically a group of children, or I'm not sure whether completely minors or not, but at least in some cases, the Court of Human Rights confirmed that a group such as minors in certain positions must be provided with adequate protection because of their vulnerability, and also adequate measures to protect them from ill treatment. So there could be some legal implication in this case. I'm not saying that it is really the ratio behind the activities of the court, but you can see that, well, if we don't know, then it's probably best to ask. Now, if we look at the EU climate policy, then gender mainstreaming is a treaty obligation for the EU. The EU has also adopted a gender equality strategy with a short section on climate change in quite recently in 2020, a gender action plan, and it is committed to those international instruments such as the Sustainable Development Goals and the Gender Action Plan. However, the EU institutions are rather silent on this topic. So the only one which is actually rather active is the European Parliament, which adopted a number of reports and resolutions, including sophisticated gender analysis of climate issues and responses, and also requirements on the European Green Deal that was introduced by the European Commission. It seems to me that the European Parliament, or from the European Parliament's perspective, the role of the EU states is not so much to tackle the gender agenda within the EU, but towards other countries. That means to pursue external policies that can make significant difference in other parts of the world. So if there is a question, how does the gender agenda affect the EU member states? Well, at least when it comes to external policy towards other states and a possibility to improve or to abolish this gender gap elsewhere. If we look into those EU policies, the European Green Deal, the Climate Energy Framework, a Clean Planet for All, the 7th or 8th Action Programme, there is basically nothing. So we have certain input for future. We have the activity of the European Parliament, but nothing more so far. If you look at the Czech level, then the governmental strategy for the current decade admits that the specific needs of women and men are not addressed in national environmental policy in a coherent way. And if we look into those policies on climate, environment, health, transport, or energy, once again, there is basically nothing. So no needs are basically addressed, or even any international or EU obligations on gender agenda. The Czech government does not deal with these issues in bilateral treaties, and we don't employ tools such as that of nature swap or other similar tools that would deal with foreign debt and basically oblige other countries to improve the human rights agenda. Now, the second dimension is a lack or deficits in participation in policy making and decision making, which once again, according to scientific studies, makes some sense to be at least balanced, because women are making difference in climate decision making, because, and it is approved, they are more protective, nuanced, with the nuanced approach to environmental protection. They also emit less, they recycle more effectively, even though class, as you can see, is sometimes more important than danger. So not all women are equal in this sense, not as a coherent group, but there are certain patterns that contribute to common policy making and decision making. In general, however, women are underrepresented, which is evident even at the level of United Nations, and recognized by the reports that notice that the constituted bodies and also the government delegations of the parties are not representing male and men and women equally, even though there are some positive developments. One of the pictures I quite like, or it at least seemed funny to me, is that even though there is a balanced representation of men and women in within a delegation, then you can see that there are differences, for example, between active speakers, and large differences between speaking time. So the same number of men and women does not mean that they will both speak the same time in practice. This is from plenary meetings before the COP26. Now, if you look at the Czech level, then, and once again inspired by the COP26 and Czech delegation, usually we are represented by our Prime Minister and representatives of Ministry of Environment, Agriculture, Industry and Transport. The negotiations are sometimes carried out by the deputy ministers of the particular ministries. And we also have the so-called Coal Commission, which serves as a government advisory body for phasing out the fossil fuels. Now, if we stretch the lifespan of the Czech Republic, those 3 decades, as a time of those 10,180 days, then we've never had a woman prime minister. So always it was a man. And the Ministry of Environment was during this time led by men for 99%. Ministry of Agriculture was 98%, Ministry of Industry was 97%, Ministry of Transport was 100%. The leadership of ministries constitutes of men to 86%, and the Coal Commission is 88%. Meanwhile, if we look at the climate litigation in the Czech Republic, then at least the theoretical analysis is often provided by the organizers of this conference, a class which is, as far as I know, led by women and composed of women. Also in practice, the first individual climate lawsuit was brought by a woman, and first strategic climate lawsuit was prepared by a team led by a woman. Those 2 lawsuits were or will be decided at the first level by a predominantly or completely male panel of judges with a chance of 70%, with cassation complaint raising the chances to 80%. And if the case arrives to the Constitutional Court, then the chance is 100% that it will be decided by a predominantly or completely male panel of judges. The similar situation arises if you go the civil direction with the damages all the way up to the Constitutional Court. The last slide with the question whether it matters or not. And I'm not sure whether the chance of success in environmental litigation relates or depends on the gender of the judge. I don't know. And it is probably hard to estimate whether the success itself is a valid criterion. Probably legality or correctness of the decision is. So I don't know. But there could be some nice statistics. For example, if the environmental case is decided by a woman judge reporter in the Czech Republic, then such case has a lower chance to be published in the collection of court decisions, which is a collection of those most significant decisions, which is then spread among the wide public. And also, it has a lower chance to be commented by judges in the media. 30% of female judges propose publication of 70% of environmental decision with a woman judge reporter, and 20% of female judges comment on 80% of environmental cases with a woman judge reporter, which means that women judges are less likely to promote or comment on their decision in environmental matters, and most of their activity can be credited to few of them. And one interesting fact, which is not climate related, if there is an error in the judgment, then women judges are quicker to find it and fix it than their male counterparts, according to statistics. And that's it. Thank you very much.